Doing Business in Today's China, panel discussion. Hi, my name is Lisa Ritchie. I'm the EVP of the Chinese Chamber of Commerce of Arizona. I'm also the VP of AACAA Arizona. On behalf of these two organizations, along with Thunderbird School of Global Management and AZ Chinese News, I'm so excited to host this panel discussion on doing business in today's China with emphasis on manufacturing. Let me introduce our panelists first. Zhang Li, President of the Chinese Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, everyone.
Doug Guthrie, Executive Director of China Initiatives and Professor at Thunderbird of ASU.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, everybody.
Kaiying Li, Publisher of AZ Chinese News.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome, everyone. Let's begin. According to economists, in the early development cycle of society, the best way to increase productivity is by manufacturing. China focus on manufacturing has flourished. How did China do it?
During the late 70s and early 80s of last century, and Deng Xiaoping started reform in China. Basically, government encouraged Chinese people to start your own business to get it rich. And hopefully part of Chinese become rich and hire others to develop the country, develop the economy. And since that time, and the Chinese economy start developing. Also, another important fact is Chinese people working hard, very smart, and willing to suffer. They take a very low salary, but working long hours. And also, Chinese government started repair the relation with other Western countries, the world, and participate in a lot of international organizations, including international trade, this kind of thing, help Chinese product export to export worldwide.
That's correct. Did the Chinese government provide any incentives, Professor?
Well, for sure there were incentives because people were living in deep poverty during this time. There were 500 million people living in abject poverty, and so it was definitely the case that China needed to continue to develop. And so the Chinese government allowing people to, as John put it, make money and grow their wealth and get their families out of poverty was surely the incentive. But the thing I want to add on here that's really important, so John talked about opening up for private business. So there was a fundamental change in the law that allowed Chinese people to become small business people, private business, household economy, 个体户, 私营企业, these kinds of organizations. But it was also very important that Deng Xiaoping opened China up to the world. So John mentioned trade organizations, but it was also crucial that Deng Xiaoping invited foreign companies to come in so that Chinese entrepreneurs and Chinese businesses and state-owned enterprises could learn from the West. It's a great story when you think about Deng Xiaoping visiting the United States. He first went to Washington, D.C. and visited Jimmy Carter, but then he went to 3 other cities. What were those 3 cities? Atlanta. Why Atlanta? Because China realized that if it was going to become a great economy, they would have to learn from foreign companies like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is headquartered in Atlanta.
Right.
Seattle. Why Seattle? Because if China was going to become a great economy, it would have to learn complex manufacturing. What company is headquartered in Seattle? Boeing, right? Why Houston? A lot of people think, well, maybe for oil. No, it was because Deng Xiaoping was dreaming big, and he wanted to go see NASA and signal to the world that when we learn consumer behavior and we learn complex manufacturing, we are going to build a very powerful economy too. And so in the 1990s, they invited a lot of foreign companies to come in and teach and collaborate with 合作伙伴, 合资企业, build joint venture relationships. And then as the 1990s went on, eventually China got into the World Trade Organization in 2001 and the market was open. So
Yes,
it's just a tremendous incentive.
Correct.
That's good.
You agree with that?
Yes, I do.
That's good. In the past many years, U.S. has benefited from low-cost manufacturing in China. On the one hand, U.S. has benefited from the low-cost manufacturing in China. On the other hand, U.S. also lost some jobs. How do we resolve this dilemma?
I'll jump in, John, and then I'd love to hear what you two have to say. But there is, of course, a dilemma because, to your point, we had a very complex manufacturing supply chain in the United States, and a lot of those corporations have moved their production and their manufacturing jobs overseas to places like China. Okay, and so it's an important thing because many people are concerned about it. Now, the first thing I'd always like to point out is this is not China taking jobs from the United States. We opened the doors for this. In 1980, when Milton Friedman was Ronald Reagan's chief economic advisor, we made an argument about neoclassical economic theory and the idea that markets should reign supreme and corporations can go wherever they want, right? And so that was our decision. It wasn't something that China did wrong. But at the same time, China was opening up to the world. Right. And there was tremendous opportunity because China needed to grow and they needed to learn manufacturing and supply chain technology. And companies like first General Motors and then companies like Apple and Tesla were all willing to move to China to help build the manufacturing supply chain.
Yes.
Now, the ways in which, to answer your question, how do you resolve the dilemma, is it's in the United States' interest to continue to have this collaborative relationship with China such that now that many complex manufacturing supply chains have been built in China, and this is not just a story of cheap labor, this is a story of the most sophisticated manufacturing supply chain in the world. But the important way to continue that development is to continue to partner with China and invite those companies back. So invite companies like TSMC to build fab sites in the Phoenix area, or JA Solar to build photovoltaic solar arrays in America. And so you rebuild those jobs through the building of manufacturing supply chains. And then we continue to learn from each other and we continue to see the flow of resources back and forth. Yeah. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, agree with that.
What do you think?
I think it's basically a natural process and basically a business decisions made by the corporate American, and more American corporate send manufacturers to overseas and hire local labor to make products. Benefited Chinese job market because get employment there, but the American lose some jobs. But in general, I think American corporate still make money and make a lot of sense. I think it's a business decision. If we want to be selective to outsource in certain industry, certain business, and keep most important manufacturer in U.S., we certainly can do so.
Yeah, and the one other thing that I would just add to this is that, to John's point, this is a business decision, but this isn't anybody taking jobs from China. The companies went to China because China had built very sophisticated manufacturing supply chains, and they could make the goods more effectively and more efficiently. The number one exporter from China to the United States is Walmart, right? It's not Chinese companies stealing products and building things so that they can export. It's Walmart that is benefiting, and American citizens are benefiting by cheaper goods. And so there's a whole dynamic here that all of these corporations are benefiting, and they're making business decisions. But again, the smart thing to solve the conundrum is that we have to continue to partner and start to collaborate to bring manufacturing supply chains back to America, and we can do this through collaboration.
Yes, that's correct. A lot of people thought China was learning from U.S. In your point of view, you mentioned basically U.S. is also learning from China, right? It's kind of a two-way street. It's not a one-way street.
For sure. I mean, I used to do work on this in the 1990s when I was studying joint ventures in China, and then continued to do work on that over the course of the decades. From 2014 to 2019, I worked for Apple. And one of the main things I did for Apple was to analyze the supply chain and see how Apple had helped China collaboratively to build the most sophisticated manufacturing supply chain in the world. So Apple benefited, China benefited, and American consumers benefit because they get the best iPhones in the world for the cheapest price. And so everybody's benefiting, but they have to continue to keep that collaboration going so that we can continue to learn how China has built the most sophisticated manufacturing supply chains.
That's wonderful. Making high-tech products overseas has potential national security and infringement issues. What are your views on these issues? Anybody?
Those things change over time. friendship also change over time. And sometimes we can work together easier. Sometimes we have different pursuit and different requirements, and we may have a harder time to work together. No matter what, we need to work together. Decoupling and division, I think, is a solution. We need to find a way to work together, no matter it's a security issue or economy issues. We need to find a solution. Address accordingly.
Okay. What do you think, Professor?
Well, for sure, it's the case that the higher tech products, there's more and more danger of sort of high tech production and high tech information, the flow of data. All of these things matter, and they matter tremendously. And countries like the United States and China care about these issues. But to John's point, we have to continue to collaborate and to work together in these issues. Building walls between us and having Huawei not allowed to operate in the United States, and is the conclusion then that Apple shouldn't be allowed to operate in China? No, obviously not, because we all are benefiting from the continued economic development and the continued technical development of the manufacturing supply chain. And so what we need to do is we need to acknowledge that yes, goods and technology flow across these borders, but as long as we're careful and as long as we work collaboratively, then I think it's the only way to move forward in the global economy.
Yes. Do you think the collaboration has more rewards than risk?
The Morris Zhang, the founder of TSMC, said famously, globalization is dead. Because kind of moving to US and did some things and he didn't want to do. And we need to work together, find a way to bring the globalization back to life. Because the whole world built on international supply chain. The chain is built. We cannot just break it simply. We need to modify it. We need to address the detailed issues and make it work for all the world. Make it work for everybody, for the interconnected global economy.
In the supply chain will destroy the global economy. We're all intertwined today. Right. China's manufacturing is becoming more advanced. Is U.S. going to be impacted? Manufacturing has become more advanced. Is U.S. going to be impacted? How do we create a win-win situation for both countries?
Competition is always a good thing. And if China become more advanced, that learning at the beginning and they're developing their own technology sectors and become more advanced, I think it's nothing wrong. It's a peaceful rise and they're learning from everybody around the world. And they're working hard. They're kind of working really hard than some other people. And if we have an impact, I think it's a positive impact. America needs to respond to this rise of China economically. We need to do better. We need to face the competition. We should win this competition also.
Yes.
I would like to reframe the question a little bit, though, because I agree with everything that John just said about America needs to rise to the competition. But I would argue that China's economic system is a better economic system than the United States right now. And that might sound like a controversial statement, but here's what I mean. So starting in the 1980s, we went down the road of neoclassical economic theory and said, we just need to deregulate and let corporations do whatever they want to do to make the most money possible. Let the market decide. Fine. And that happened, and a lot of corporations went overseas to find cheaper labor and eventually more sophisticated labor supply chains in China as those were built up over the last 40 years. China's system is a little bit different, and this is where I think we can learn. China has built what we like to call in economic sociology a political culture of institution building. So China doesn't just say, let the market decide. What China does is, of course, we have Beijing up here, and Beijing makes decisions around 5-year plans and targets for economic growth, but what they've done is they've created a political culture that incentivizes local entrepreneurial behavior among government officials. So in my own work, there's a famous scholar called Andy Walder who wrote a very famous article in 1995 called Local Governments as Industrial Firms. And the very argument was that local organizations, which are government organizations, need to think like entrepreneurs. And so they think in this ecosystem of how to build not cities that are competing against each other or corporations that are trying to drive each other out of business. They're thinking about how to build industrial clusters in very effective spaces. So for example, a lot of people have heard of Shanghai, Shenzhen, Zhengzhou, but they haven't heard of smaller places like Zhenjiang or Zhengzhou, or like these places that have built industrial clusters in photovoltaic arrays. And so they've become very, very effective and powerful in building this ecosystem that China is. So I think if we took our lessons a little bit in the United States and understood how to organize an economy better, we might learn something good.
Yes, that will be beneficial to the U.S.
I agree with that.
Other countries like Vietnam and India are competing with China to become the next global factory. How is this going to change the world dynamics?
I think we'll be more diversified, and it's not one manufacturer facility in the world which was China, but they have maybe more than one, maybe more than two, maybe more than three. And I think the world, in terms of manufacturing, will be more diversified.
Yeah, that's true. What do you think?
Well, I mean, people talk a lot about this idea that, okay, China is going to be displaced by Vietnam, India, as you mentioned. For me, I'm a little bit more skeptical on the first front. So let's look at Vietnam. People talk about Vietnam as the next place where iPhones, for example, are going to be made, and people in procurement at Apple certainly spend time thinking about Vietnam. Vietnam is a country of 95 million people. Probably at max, the number of laborers in the country is maybe 30 million, right? China has a dispatched labor system, the migrant labor group, that's 350 million, right? So it's just, and China's been very smart because the government is engaged with creating the two-tier labor markets that operate in factories. So on the one hand, you have the dispatch labor system that allows for basically migrant labor to be seasonal employees for spikes in production all over the country all year, right? But then you have vocational technical training that has trained the line managers. And so it's so this is a massive system that operates with 1.4 billion people in a country with the most sophisticated manufacturing supply chain in the world. So Vietnam, I'm a little just not skeptical, but it's just would take a
little
time.
Too small, on different scale.
It's a different scale. That being said, so what about India? Okay, well, India is a country that has just recently
Similar population.
surpassed China as the most populous nation on earth, and so, and the important thing about China, remember, is it's an integrated manufacturing supply chain, right? So India could compete. The difference between India and China is that China has been working so hard to very aggressively build this manufacturing supply chain for the last 40 years. And they've been working very closely with foreign companies, again, not just Apple and Tesla, but also GM and many of the other companies that have been investing in China for the last 30 years.
Right.
It's going to take a long time for India to build that manufacturing supply chain. The final thing here, though, is, so we hear, for example, well, Foxconn just built a plant in Chennai. Doesn't that mean iPhones can be made in Chennai? No, because Foxconn is just final assembly. Apple works with 1,600 factories in China in their industrial clusters. So the idea that the final assembly plant is built in Chennai doesn't mean anything, right? Because you have to have an integrated manufacturing supply chain to make all this work. So, India could eventually compete with and replace China as the manufacturer for the world, but it's going to take 50 years.
During 80s or 90s of the last century, when I was come to the United States, everything I bought was made in Taiwan. And quickly changed, everything I bought was made in China. And basically, China takes some low-end production from Taiwan. But Taiwan didn't stop, didn't die. They started, they regroup, they started doing more advanced technology products and services. Right. Look at today, Taiwan become world #1 chip manufacturing base.
That's right.
Same thing, come to talk about Vietnam and India. They may going further, doing better, and take some business from China at a low end. But China have a better opportunity to do more advanced technology and more advanced industry. So I think the world is large enough to allow everybody to.
Right.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for your participation. Thank you everyone for your participation. We'll continue our discussion in the seminar coming up in late September. Professor, I heard you can do a podcast, right?
Yes, thank you. I mean, as you can tell from our conversation, I'm very passionate about this issue. This is the most important time in U.S.-China relations in the last 40 years, and it's critical to continue to think about collaboration and engagement. And Phoenix is such a fascinating place, but I think Phoenix is ground zero for this discussion about U.S.-China relations right now. So here we are, and we're having these kinds of conversations in our seminar at the Thunderbird School of Global Management at ASU, and we are going to launch a podcast that's going to discuss all of these issues.
That's great. There's so many wonderful things. Stay tuned.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.